Hi, I'm Stephen Slate from Slate Digital.
And I'm Alex Oana, Slate Digital.
The Trigger plugin is a plugin for Pro Tools, for Nuendo, Logic, Ableton, Cubase, Reaper. It's a plugin that comes with my entire Platinum drum sample collection. And it has 6 different channels of drum sampling. It's a drum replacer. I should probably say that right now.
Or enhancer.
Or enhancer.
Sometimes you're in the position where it's a very well recorded drum kit, but you just there's like with getting a great snare sound. There's that problem of leakage, and you need that crack. So blend a little sample in there, get the punch that you need, the attack.
There's a few scenarios where this comes in as such a useful tool. The first and most obvious one is when you go to mix drum tracks and the drum sounds just aren't where you want them in your head. I mean, if you are mixing a big rock band and in your head you have this amazing big large room rock sound,
right.
but your drum tracks were recorded in a small room
Yeah.
with maybe a different type of drum set than this sound requires, you can use Trigger to recreate the drum sound of your dreams.
Because you have samples of just the ambience, for instance.
Just the ambience from NRG Recording, Room A, which is the home to so many great rock records,
Yeah.
Linkin Park, just so many great rock records have been recorded in that room.
I just got to make a record there myself, and that's like the perfect room sound for drums. It's got the perfect pre-delay time and the perfect amount of decay for rock songs.
Yeah, and so you can recreate the sound of this amazing large room drum sound, even though the drums you recorded might have been in a small bedroom studio.
Right.
Another thing that's really cool is, for instance, I record this band and the drummer used a particular small snare drum on that day, and then when we started listening to the mix, we're like, man, this quick, tight drum sound didn't work. We needed a big, fat, deep, slow, splatty snare. And we were able to just use Trigger and to add this sample of this big, huge 6.5-inch snare that I'd recorded for the Platinum collection and mixed it in, and it was perfect because it had the snap of his real snare with the bigness from the sample, and it just completely saved the entire drum sound.
When I first started making records, I heard about how people used to. How engineers I respected would take the time to record or to tune the drum kit to the key of the song.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd really spend time, especially with the snare drum, getting it in key with the song. And one of the features in Trigger is that you can actually tune the pitch of the drum. So
I do that a lot with kicks. You especially note it in the resonance of a kick, or especially in the resonance of toms.
Right. And to make it work with the bass, for example, maybe keep it out of the way of the bass, or like on more modern music, sometimes you want there to actually be a note in the kick.
So now we've talked about why or how you could use drum replacement and enhancement to help out your mixes, but more about the Trigger plugin. The cool thing about Trigger is it allows you to do this drum enhancement replacement without hassle, because its detection algorithm is so well refined that it is phase accurate, which means it analyzes the chunk of the transient of your original sound and matches it with the chunk of the transient of the sample.
Right.
So it doesn't just align the start of the drums or the samples.
Right.
It actually matches the transient, so you really get the most accurate, punchy recreation, and it follows even complex snare rolls and snare fills, really authentically.
Yeah,
so it sounds very natural.
Right. You can customize the settings to tweak it so that you can follow very light rolls.
Right.
So up to the loudest smacks.
And another thing that's cool about what it does is, have you ever listened to a snare drum? And have you ever heard, I'm talking about a real snare drum, and have you ever heard leakage like from the hi-hat or leakage from a tom? Well, with most drum replacers or enhancers, they'll mistrigger the sample because it'll think that hi-hat leakage or that tom leakage was a snare drum hit.
Right.
Well, with Trigger, what you have is this system called leakage suppression. So let's say your snare drum has a lot of hi-hat leakage. You would take your hi-hat track, send it to Trigger's sidechain input, and then Trigger knows, okay, whenever I see these hi-hats, don't mistrigger the sample. And you could do the same thing with toms. Oftentimes, with the kick drum, you can hear the snare drum in the kick drum because, the snare is sometimes so loud that it leaks into the kick, and, things leak into toms. So no matter what you're doing, Trigger is smart enough to know only trigger this sound and don't trigger whatever's coming in my side chain.
Man, you have no idea how much time this saves, because whenever I do drum enhancement or replacement, I usually have to copy the snare drum track, for example, and edit it. It takes an hour to perfectly edit a snare drum track so that there are no missed triggers in it. You know, the toms that bleed in the snare track, the kick and the hi-hat that bleed in the snare track, you have to manually edit that out. And even with tools in Pro Tools, for example, that help you strip silence and whatever, you can now do in about 30 seconds with Trigger. It does it automatically.
The biggest compliment I get on Trigger is from engineers, and I remember even Dave Matthews, one of his live engineers, emailed me when there was a problem with live recording. He said, not only did you save my drum track with Trigger, but it also took me 20 minutes to do it, whereas I thought it would have taken me a full day of work. Mm-hmm. And we get that a lot. You know, we get a lot of guys saying that, you know, this just saved my project, and it took me so little time and little effort to do it. And that to me means a lot. So check out Trigger.